Hey y'all, welcome to Adventures with Aggie, brought to you by Coco's Coffee House. If you haven't been to Coco's Coffee House, go check them out. They're on Bleecker Street near NYU in Greenwich Village. Go get some good coffee. They're great. They'll be excited to see you. They've only been open for about a month now, so go check them out. But today, let's welcome Sean Banks. Sean Banks is the general manager of the DC Breeze. The DC Breeze is an ultimate Frisbee team located in Washington, D.C., that competes in the American Ultimate Disc League. He's going to tell us what Ultimate Frisbee is, maybe some of the rules, and his story and how he ended up at the DC Breeze. So please welcome Sean. Sean, how are you doing today?
Doing very well. Thanks for having me on. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to learn more about you and Ultimate. I don't know much about this sport, so I think this is going to be a learning episode for me. But I guess let's just start kind of with your background and who you are and maybe what you do. Can you start there?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Sean Banks. I am currently general manager of the DC Breeze, a professional ultimate frisbee team representing Washington, D.C. in the American Ultimate Disc League. My background is actually a pretty interesting one. I grew up in southern Indiana and just north of Louisville, Kentucky, and then also went to college in southern Indiana, but in southwestern Indiana. So at the University of Evansville in Evansville, Indiana, go Aces, where I began my studies interested in becoming a band director or music teacher or something within music education. And by junior year, I decided that I didn't want to do that anymore. And a big reason for that was summer of freshman year. I got my first kind of real job, and I had the opportunity to travel all over the Midwest and facilitate youth baseball tournaments. So I'd show up on site. I'd meet the umpires. I'd make sure they had baseballs. I'd make sure that games started and ended on time. It was really, really fun. I had a blast doing it. And it was really the first time that I considered working in sports as a job, where previously, like I said, I wanted to be a music teacher. And then junior year, I switched from music education and got a Bachelor of Science in Music degree instead, which is a little less intense. And I only needed one more class to do it, so I could still graduate on time. And I was a Spanish minor also at the time, and only needed a few more classes to make it a Bachelor of Arts. So by the end of junior year, I was pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Music and a Bachelor of Arts in Spanish because I knew that my career path and aspirations had changed so wildly. And I am super passionate about baseball. Grew up a huge baseball fan, and that's kind of why I got a job doing baseball tournaments during the summer, right? So then I started thinking, well, how do I make baseball my career? How, there are different teams you can work for in different capacities, and specifically the Dominican Republic is a huge spot for baseball, and they're super passionate about it. And I needed to study in a foreign country that spoke Spanish in order to get my degree. So I circled the Dominican Republic, and that's where I went. And eventually got my degree, and everything worked out the way that it did. And that's kind of my background, a sports industry professional now with a degree in Spanish and music. After 6 years in minor league baseball, I made the jump, and now I work for a professional ultimate frisbee team and have learned a lot, and it's been really eye-opening. But yeah, that's me.
That's awesome. I love that you have so many interests, and like now here we are, you kind of jumped into this whole new thing with Ultimate, which is super cool. I guess how have having these degrees in music and Spanish, how has that impacted your work now? I don't know what the relationship is like with Spanish or music in Ultimate, but I'd love to hear if you have that relationship there.
For sure. So specifically for music, anyone pursuing music out there that's listening will understand that it is one of the most intense courses of study in all courses of study. I was in orchestra rehearsal 2 nights a week. I was in wind ensemble rehearsal 2 nights a week. I was in jazz band rehearsal 1 day a week. And those are just my ensembles, right? And then I have all of my other classes. There were semesters where I took more than 22 credit hours. So you really learn time management, you learn discipline, you learn how to operate in a fast-paced environment, how to think on your feet, how to meet the expectations of a lot of different people demanding a lot of different things from you. So I'll say working in sports is pretty similar to that. We spend a lot of hours at the ballpark or at the ultimate field. We're expected to meet the demands and expectations of all kinds of different people in various departments and marketing and ticket sales, and all kinds of things. So I draw a lot of parallels actually between studying music and working in sports, as surprising as that may seem. And then Spanish was really what opened all of the doors for me, because no matter what organization you end up with, likely they have a need for someone who speaks Spanish or who can translate. So the reason that I even got my first full-time opportunity in baseball was because I had interned with the Pirates in Bradenton, Florida at their spring training facility. And there are tons of minor league players from the Dominican Republic and from Venezuela and from Puerto Rico that are native Spanish speakers and don't know a lot of English. So I'd be, at the stadium or at the Pirates dorm complex, and there'd be a player that couldn't communicate with whoever they needed to communicate, and they'd say, "Sean, get over here. Like, we need your help." So then I'd act as translator. And that, on top of the other work that I did, I guess I kind of proved myself in other facets as well. But music prepared me, made me very disciplined, time and detail oriented. And then Spanish opened all the doors, because everyone wants somebody that can translate for them, and especially in sports and especially in baseball, which is dominated by Latino players that are native English speakers from various countries. So that's how I kind of equate those things in my experience in sports.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely connected. I had no idea where you were going to go with this. But that's so cool to see that it does affect you, and it has impacted your work. But I guess I kind of want you to go deeper into your time in the Dominican Republic. Can you tell me how this was? I know I would love to go do this. But yeah, can you just kind of share your experience there?
Yeah, absolutely. The Dominican Republic was my single most favorite experience, of my life at this point. I learned so much in such a short amount of time. I was only there for 4 months, but you learn, I went to learn the language primarily, right? But I learned so much about myself, and I learned so much about the culture of Latin America, and specifically of the Caribbean. And it was so eye-opening, and it's different, right? Like there are so many things that are so different between the Dominican Republic and the U.S. But essentially how it worked is I lived with a Dominican family in Santo Domingo, in the capital city there on the southern coast of the island, in a neighborhood called Gascue, which is actually where some former politically powerful people, actually some people who kind of committed some atrocities, had a lot of their operations and houses and things. So it's a really unique area. But again, I was going to classes at Dominican universities, and with people who spoke only Spanish and professors that spoke only Spanish. And I had taken a lot of classes in high school, and I had taken a lot of classes in college, but it's an entirely different experience to be in another country, with those people speaking their specific dialect. Dominican Spanish is a very, very different form of Spanish than, someone from Barcelona or someone from Argentina or Chile. So those are things that you don't really understand until you fully experience them. But I loved living with my host family. I loved experiencing the culture and the music and the food. And I have lifelong friends now that I stay in touch with that still live in Santo Domingo. And then again, I took like a marketing class and various other business classes, because I was kind of on this sports business track at the time. But again, it was the most favorite thing I've ever done. I'd go back and live there in a heartbeat if it made sense. It is a little hot. It is a little warm in the summer, or I guess generally. But that, again, was so awesome and so eye-opening, and I learned so much about myself.
Yeah, I'd go too. If I had the opportunity, I'd go right now.
Yeah.
It sounds awesome though. Cool. Let's talk about the DC Breeze. How did this opportunity come about? What I guess are you a huge Ultimate fan? I don't know, but can you just kind of tell me how you got into this position?
Sure. Yeah. So I don't think at the time that the Breeze decided to hire a general manager, I would have called myself a huge Ultimate fan. I did grow up playing. We played at church camp. We played a very different version of Ultimate at church camp, though. We played a church camp version, I guess is what you would call it. In organized Ultimate, you have your sidelines and your end zone lines, and there's the back of the end zone. At church camp, we didn't have any of those things. There were no sidelines. There was no back of the end zone. So you could go as far north, south, east, and west as you wanted, as long as the disc crossed the pole or the cone or whatever it was that we'd chosen that day. It counted. It was a point. And that's that's very much a unique version. The other thing that we did at church camp was if you intercepted the disc, you could run with it. And in organized ultimate, that's one of the things that makes it unique is when you have the disc, you can't move. So a lot like basketball, when you pick up your dribble, you can establish a pivot foot, but then in order to advance the disc down the field, you have to pass it to your teammates, and then your teammates have to catch it in the end zone. So they can't run with it ever, but at church camp, if you intercepted it, you could run with it until you got touched, which again, I kind of feel like a heretic sometimes when I tell people that, and they're like, you did what? But how I ended up with the organization is, again, I had been in minor league baseball for around 7 years, and I was actually with a local minor league baseball team in Bowie, Maryland at the time, and the Breeze ownership group decided that they needed somebody to focus on growing the organization full time. So I happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right preparation. So I was fortunate in a lot of ways, but again, I did a lot of hard work to get to this point as well. And it made sense. I had actually been a Breeze season ticket holder in 2019. So I had been to games. So throughout the interview process, I could cite specific examples of things I liked and what I didn't like and what I would change. And ultimately, again, the Breeze ownership was gracious enough, and I was fortunate enough to be offered the opportunity to join and be tasked with, again, growing the organization in a lot of different ways. And it's been a blast over the past just over a year. That was December 2019 that I joined the organization. But yeah, I'd definitely call myself a huge Ultimate fan now. Maybe not before, but definitely now.
That's perfect. It worked. In the end, it worked. You're a huge fan. I love it. I guess my next question is kind of like about development in Ultimate. So like where do the players come from? Like are they I don't know. I don't even know if I had an Ultimate team like in my town growing up, you know. I know it's growing a lot now, which we'll get to next, but I guess what are these players like? Like what is their background? Did they grow up playing Ultimate, or is this something that they decided to do later on in life?
Yeah, so the answer to that question, I think, varies pretty wildly because also where I grew up, there wasn't really organized youth ultimate. It wasn't in the middle schools. It wasn't in the high schools. There may have been a club ultimate scene, which is like kind of the amateur level. But if there was, I wasn't really aware of it. And I wasn't aware of any college teams where I grew up, but there are various cities throughout the country that are ultimate hotspots. So you're thinking LA, New York, Chicago, even Madison, Wisconsin. They do have organized youth ultimate. They do have middle school teams and high school teams and lots of club teams and college teams. And Washington, D.C. is also one of those areas. So we have some of the top youth players in the country, actually, that go on to play club level ultimate, and they go on to play elite college ultimate. And then we draw a lot of our players from those kids who were once really good ultimate players that became young adults who are really good ultimate players, who became adults that are now really good ultimate players. And that's kind of where we draw our players from, that pool of college players and club players that grew up playing, or there are a fair amount of them that didn't grow up playing, just like me, but discovered the sport later in life, committed to learning it, getting a lot better at throwing and jumping and running and everything that you need to do as an ultimate player. And a good example of that is actually the Breeze 2018 MVP, league MVP, Rowan McDonald, who didn't really grow up playing ultimate, but by 2018, he's the MVP of the entire league, put in the work, learned as much as he could about the sport. Again, I'll come back to what I said first, is that it varies so wildly, right? In Southern Indiana, the structure is maybe not really there, but in LA and New York and DC, it definitely is. And I'm sure there are other cities too. But, all the typical suspects, right, are the ones that you think of. So finally, where we get our players is like mostly club and collegiate athletes, ultimate players, that have some experience, but then some that don't as well.
I love that. I feel like maybe it's not too late for me. I can figure it out sometime soon and jump in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. I guess next question, kind of a follow up to that, is what's the growth been like? I know this is becoming more popular in the US and on a global scale as well. So I guess how have you seen that growth, and what do you think? I feel like more kids are getting involved, right? The youth is being impacted by this. So I guess how have you seen that growth from your position?
Yeah, so ultimate is one of the fastest growing sports globally right now. And a big reason for that is youth involvement. If I had to guess, and I haven't really looked into it, if I had to guess, if I did look into it, that youth ultimate in Southern Indiana, where I grew up, is probably bigger now, is probably more organized now. And that's been kind of the theme for a few years. And you're right that it is growing globally. Another big reason for that is all we need is a disc, right? All you need is a disc and some green space. It's not like football where you need pads and a helmet and the field and all of these different things, or baseball where you need a bat and a glove and cleats. I guess technically cleats help ultimate players a lot, so maybe you need cleats and a disc. But that also makes the sport more accessible, right, for kids that come from families that maybe don't have a ton of resources, that all they have to do is find somebody with a disc, essentially, right? They don't even necessarily need to buy one if they have a friend who has one, and they can learn to play that way. So I think accessibility is a big reason why you're seeing it grow at such a rapid rate at the youth level. And then it makes sense, right, that as youth ultimate grows, then every other level grows. If there are more kids playing, then like I said before, there are going to be more young adults playing, and then young adults become adults, and adults become pros. So I think, yeah, a big reason for that is accessibility and the growth of youth ultimate for sure.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because I feel like everybody has a Frisbee somewhere. It's like comes in like when you buy like a bucket and a shovel at the beach or something, there's usually a Frisbee thrown in that bag of like fun toys and stuff for kids. So I feel like we just have random ones, or they're given away. That was a common thing in my high school and my middle school, was like our school would just give us Frisbees, like go have fun on field day and stuff like that. So I think that's a good point. All you need is a Frisbee. It sounds like I was actually speaking with somebody in soccer freestyle this morning, and he said the same thing with soccer. All you need is a ball, which that automatically makes those sports way more accessible, like you were saying before. It's awesome. I love it. I know I have some Frisbees. Maybe I need to get back at it actually, but I'll be motivated after this talk.
I have currently like 350 plus Frisbees, I think, because all of the Breeze merchandise is in my basement. I do all of our order fulfillment and everything right here out of my house. Gosh. So I have a bunch of Frisbees on hand all the time.
That's crazy. I can't say I have that many Frisbees. That's awesome though. Cool. Okay. I'm going to move into COVID now. How was the AUDL impacted by COVID? What does the season look like? How are practice sessions going and things like that?
Yeah, great question. And we're actually very unique and in a very unique position, because AUDL athletes aren't full-time professional athletes. So the majority of them have day jobs, and then they do their practices and their workouts and their games on the evenings, on the weekends. So we had to think a little bit harder about how to deal with COVID and whether or not to play. And, them not being professional athletes full time aside, we don't really understand all of the long-term effects of getting the virus and what happens after you've had it. How's your heart affected? How are your lungs affected full time? So, full-time professional athletes right now are absolutely dealing with that. These teams that are playing right now and they keep having to postpone games because players are getting exposed. What happens if the top NFL athletes or the top MLB athletes get the virus and then, their lungs are affected for the rest of their lives, and that's the end of their playing careers, right? So, I don't want to say that I wish some of those leagues thought harder about doing things right now. But, in an alternate universe, had they done that, they may have protected a few more people. But then coming back to my point about our athletes not being full-time professional athletes is they have the rest of their life to also consider. These are teachers. They're people out in the community with jobs. They're grocery store workers. They're contractors and managers. And so getting affected with the virus and maybe having to miss work is another real concern and something that we had to think really hard about. So rewinding to 2020 or to March 2020, when Rudy Gobert, it was announced that he was COVID positive and the industry came to a screeching halt, we were 2.5 weeks away from the start of our season. And it was like the bottom fell out. And we started having conversations about what we needed to do and how we were going to deal with it, and pretty much immediately decided to postpone the start of our season. And we were very optimistic that we'd get everything under control and we'd be playing by May, and how wrong we were, right? So then we pushed again into June, and we pushed again into July. And then we were watching, the NBA and the MLS and the National Women's Soccer League doing these bubble concepts, where all of the teams go to one location and they stay in a hotel and they play all of their games at that site. And we had conversations about that. We had conversations about all AUDL teams going to Indianapolis and playing in a bubble. And we thought that might be a way to protect the players. But then when we went to the players were concerned, and rightfully so, right? And they said, again, when I told you earlier, we have all of these things to think about. It's so much bigger than Ultimate right now. And a lot of them, a good number of them said, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it for us to be playing right now. And we heard them, and we took those concerns to heart, and we canceled the season. And it was like a dagger. It was a dagger right to the heart. We had everything lined up for us. The Breeze did. We had our best roster probably since 2016, all signed and ready to go. We'd switched up our colors. We were going to be rocking the red this year as opposed to our long time like navy blue. We were going to be hosting the All-Star Game in 2020. We were talking to all these new potential corporate partners and all of these groups that wanted to come out, and it was just like everything was lined up for us. And then we got punched in the mouth, and it hurt. It absolutely, it was tough to deal with for a few months, and we had to pivot, and we started doing virtual events and all kinds of different programming, just like a lot of leagues did. But that's kind of how we dealt with it. We canceled our season. We went virtual for a bit, and then once the real off season started, we kind of started operating as if it were an off season again, as opposed to an extended off season. So now we're full steam ahead for 2021 right now.
Awesome. That was my next question. How's 2021 looking? What's the timeline like for y'all?
Sure. So normally we would start in early April. Like I said, last March, we were just 2 weeks away from our first game on April 4th, I think it was. So we normally start like the first weekend of April. We'd play through the end of July, have a round of playoffs in like early August, and then championship weekend, Final Four style event in the middle of August, where the top 4 teams travel to the same location and they play the semifinals and championship in that location. It's a really cool event. And that's normally in like the middle of August, like I said. So we are feeling not super optimistic right now about an April 1 or first weekend of April start. We're kind of looking and thinking about May. That's what we're circling on the calendar right now. But again, all of these things are so fluid and can change so quickly. It could be June before we know it, right? And if that were to happen, we do still plan to play a full 12-game season, regardless if it's April, May, or June start. So that the implications of that then are fewer weekends off, fewer bye weekends. If we were to start in June, I think it would be something like 12 games in 12 weeks. So like literally no days off. We might do a double header or two here and there to get some guys some rest. But, and then the further implications of that are we would probably push playoffs into late August and championship weekend into the middle of September. But it's also up in the air right now. But we're planning as if we're going to have a season. We're selling season tickets. We're getting people excited about it. We're getting corporate partners excited about it. And it is a bit of an exciting time, despite this like cloud over your head all the time, right? But the other really exciting thing that we're looking very much forward to is Washington, D.C. is the host city for 2021 championship weekend. So top 4 teams in the country are going to be traveling right here into our backyard, competing for the top spot, and we're crossing our fingers that we get to play and that we get to have the 2020 that we envisioned, but in 2021 instead go as the representative of the new Atlantic Division to our hometown championship weekend and win it all. That's the goal right now. But we've definitely dealt with the impacts of COVID and are having so many conversations about what 2021 is going to look like.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm excited. I'm glad y'all are excited though. I mean, I feel like it'll happen, I don't know,
Yes.
Not sure when, but it's coming.
Definitely.
I love it. Cool. So I guess just a couple more questions for you, but how can people get involved? Like, how would you suggest people get involved either in Ultimate generally or with the DC Breeze specifically?
Yeah, so Ultimate generally, I mean, look into your Facebook groups and your meetup groups, because there are a lot of them that are like Ultimate meetup every Saturday at X time or every Wednesday at X time. Check out the USA Ultimate website. They have a lot of information there. And then how to specifically get involved with the Breeze, make sure you're playing in middle school and in high school, and you're picking the George Masons and the George Washingtons of the world, so we can come and scout you at games and everything. And if you have interest and you want to play Club Ultimate, look into what there is in your area. We have a very, very elite club scene here in Washington, D.C., but that's just to play. If you want to get involved and you have an AUDL team close by, buy tickets, support those organizations. If you work for a company, get them out to a game, do an office outing. If you're a marketer, right? Market with these teams, because our fan base is very much a fan base that you want to market to, right? Sponsor your local teams, sponsor your ADL teams. So there are lots of ways to get involved that are not playing. And definitely, if you have never been to a live game, go to one. Go to one as soon as it's possible and that you can. Aggie, I don't know where you're located in New York. I don't know how close you are to New Rochelle, but if you have an opportunity, get out to a New York Empire game. Check it out, because it is so much fun. These athletes are so talented. They jump so high and they run so fast and they dive so far and they can throw Frisbees so incredibly well in thousands of different ways. So definitely get out to a game if you can. Fingers crossed that that's 2021, but I guess we'll see what happens, right?
Yes. No, New York Empire will be first stop after COVID.
Yeah, and if you're ever in Washington, D.C., we'll make sure you have a midfield seat and a beverage in your hand.
I love that. I love it. Can't wait. Let's see. Last question for you. So I always end my shows on advice. What is one piece of advice you would give to young people or students looking to work in the sports industry?
That is a great question. And I think I can provide some pretty valuable insight. And that is that when I was in college and I was switching my major and deciding that I wanted to be in pro sports, the one thing I really wish that I would have done was reach out to industry professionals and just network with them, because there are so many that are willing to have a conversation and that are willing to tell you about their experience, and they're willing to help you understand what a career in sports means, and that's at all levels too, right? Because working in minor league baseball is so different than working in the NBA, and working in the NBA is so different than working in the NHL, for example, or the AUDL, right? So reach out to those people. You're going to meet, or you're going to encounter some that are annoyed by it, and that's what I was afraid of in college, that think they're some kind of elite that doesn't deserve to be contacted. But I would say at this point in the professional sports industry, they're in a minority now. So reach out to those people, talk to them, and then, down the line, if they have a job open up, you all had a great conversation, right? Maybe they'll ask for your resume, or maybe they already have it, because you did reach out. And then there you go, your foot's in the door. You have this network of professionals that can support you, that would love to support you. So yeah, again, look into what teams are in your market and definitely start networking with professionals now, even before you graduate, because so many of them will be glad to hear from you and so glad to help you. And it's a great way to get started in, pursuing a long career in the sports industry.
Definitely. I think that's also the story of this podcast, meeting people,
yeah,
speaking to people about their stories and stuff. But yeah, awesome advice. Sean, thank you so much for coming on and introducing Ultimate. This will be my first Ultimate episode. And I'm so excited that now maybe my listeners will get a better understanding and go out to an AUDL game. But thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on again. And, you mentioned before that you have listeners in different countries, and I know that South America loves Ultimate, and Europe loves Ultimate, and India and Southeast Asia and all these different places love Ultimate. So if you're listening from a different country, I encourage you to find out what's available for you to play, for you to get involved. And if there's nothing, you be the one. Go start an Ultimate League. And again, Aggie, thanks for having me on. This was great. I really enjoyed this.
Thanks so much, Sean, for sharing your story and giving us more information on the DC Breeze and how we can get involved with Ultimate. Join us for another episode of Fitness Friday coming on Friday at 10 a.m.